governance. It's a great pleasure being here. And let me start from where we are, here, Tashkent. Because Uzbekistan is not just the venue where this conference, where this panel is happening, but it's also a very useful example of what we are going to discuss today. Over the recent year, Uzbekistan has been changing fast and profoundly. The country has moved from a state-led model to one that has been building the legal, institutional, and market foundation for investment. We have seen this in sector reform, in the efforts to attract private capital, in capital market development, digitalization, and in the climate and sustainability agenda. We see this as a real progress. It is meaningful, and really it matters. However, for us that we are looking at trying to look into the crystal ball and try to understand the future of corporate governance, we need to ask the next question. How do reform move from paper to practice? This is the real test for the future of corporate governance. Laws can be adopted, institutions can be created, directors called independent can be appointed. But the real test is whether behavior and dynamics change. In boardrooms, in management teams, in regulators, and in the way investors assess trust. This is why for today's discussion, I would like you to keep 3 words in mind. One is structure, people, and accountability. Structure, the laws, the regulation, the policies, really what creates the frame for governance. People, the shareholders, directors, executive officials, stakeholders who make the system work. At the end, governance is about people. And accountability, which to me includes 2 distinct forces. One is pressure, and the second is reward, each of them being essential. Without accountability, structure stays on paper, and people have no reason to change behavior. For me, structure, people, accountability are really the 3 ingredients that make corporate governance real. And we will test this through 4 themes: governance in systemic sectors, risk management and strategic adaptation, artificial intelligence, and the future of ESG. But before we start, let me briefly introduce the panel. I will not read the biographies. I will just say what each panelist help us to understand. Ariel, Mallard, de Rothschild bring the investor perspectives. What does capital really trust? Tarek Mansour bring the transformation perspectives. How do companies adapt when strategy, technology and organization are all changing? Eve Novikova brings the leadership and culture perspectives. How do we make people governance trust? Ferdinand Tuistra brings the climate governance perspectives. How does transition become a board-level issue? Dmitry Avdosiev brings the company reality test. When does governance help a company move, and when does it slow down? And last but not least, Abdullah Abdukaridov will bring the institutional reform perspectives. How do you build governance at country level, not only at the company level? And I'm Giampiero Cini. I'm delighted to moderate this discussion. So let us begin. Let me start with systemic sectors. Today we consider banking as systemic, and as such, banking has its own rules, its own structure. But the banking sector has taught us an important lesson. It was only after the 2008 financial crisis the banks were no longer treated as ordinary companies. Society understood the cost of failure. Governance standard then went up. True, banks were supervised entities well before 2008, but supervision was mostly on number, capital adequacy, financial information, less so on behaviors. The problem was not that the banks had no rules. They had many rules, but the rules did not always address the heart of the business, the governance of risk. And in fact, banking is the business of taking risk. Today, there are other sectors that are becoming too critical to ignore. Energy is one clear example. Energy is no longer a utility center, a utility service. It is the engine of the economy. And this brings us back to Uzbekistan. Until recently, Uzbekistan energy sector was state-controlled, vertically integrated, and underinvested. The governance model was designed mainly to control, not to enable. Now the sector has been under a deep transformation, and we have seen important changes. Generation, transmission, distribution have been unbundled, a regulator has been created, tariff reform has begun, investment has increased, and renewable is becoming more and more important. So the structure has been reformed, but is this enough to make the reform durable? When a sector is considered strategic, is ordinary corporate governance enough? Or we need a stronger model, one that focuses on continuity, resilience, innovation, and public trust? Abdullah, I'd like to start with you. So Uzbekistan has made important progress in reforming strategic sector, including energy. In a strategic sector, what governance model is needed? What is the next challenge? Institution, incentives, board professionalism, accountability, or something else?
Thank you. You were mentioning about two things. Now, three things, but two are very important, which is about people and about gaining the trust. And when you say about the system as well, it's also related to that, because gaining the trust starts with the system. But when you talk to the government, and we are talking about big investors which are coming and talking to the government directly, I have to be careful, I guess, with this. Thank you. So, when you talk to the government, there are several things to be taken into the account. If an investor just wants to come to the country and grab the resources and take them away, buy cheaper and sell it more expensive, then it's not the approach anymore which is going to be tolerated and welcomed by the government. Now, we would love to offer to investors something more deeper and more perspective looking. Number one is our political stability. And the second, our historical heritage. The third, our geography. The fourth is our human capital. And fifth is infrastructure that we have in the country. If you look all of those five, those are things are already existing, and you don't have to recreate them. You just have to adapt to their business needs. And that's an approach should be taken in mind. But if you will be coming to the country just to get the benefit by offering little but asking more, that's not going to work anymore. That is something we have to deliver to our investors. Of course, we would love that our investors will be coming to the position of winning something as well. But just winning without offering something to win to other part as well is not going to work when you talk about big businesses, especially on the energy side or kind of more structural things like transport, utilities, etc. Those things are built up not in one night. Those things need some time, a lot of investments, and trust gained by both sides. That means you have to build your business model in something which exists already, and you just need to adopt. And what five factors I have mentioned, those are things which exist in this country. And I think that should be our new message to investors and narratives which we want to deliver to our investors. And coming back to the energy sector, you have seen that the models which we have selected, the standard contract with investors for 30 years, guaranteed purchase standards, which are guaranteed backed by the government, etc. This kind of model, which brings long-term perspective, stability, and fixed accountability, as you have mentioned, that is something which we are looking at. So accountability goes for both sides, but accountability works when the expectations are valid and well counted. When the expectations are too high or
like this.
okay, thank you.
This is perfect.
Stereotyping. So when the accountability more about the trust, but accountability works when the things are counted perfectly. So, which means expectations, behavior of both sides. That needs to be accounted as well. So, in conclusion, I want to say that when you talk to the government, you have to come up with a long-term approach, long-term ability, and with something which government is able to handle and control. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That takes actually naturally to the investor perspective, because at the end, it is investor who decide whether governance is credible. But I like the formula. I like the 5 ingredients for the recipe. Ariel, if I can turn to you. When a country is reforming strategic sector and the state remain an important actor, what gives investor confidence? What do you look for behind the legal framework? Is the recipe that Abdullah has formulated attractive to you?
Thank you, Gian Piero. Does it work well? Yes? Okay. For this interesting question. But I would like first to say how impressed I am with the reforms that the Uzbek government is carrying out and is wishing to carry out. Because since the economic liberalization now 9 years ago, Uzbekistan's average GDP has been growing 6% per year with peaks at 8%, and the GDP per capita has been doubling. It is quite remarkable that it's not so easy to implement reforms and to keep the GDP growing, as well as the key macroeconomics markers improving month by month. And Abdullah was mentioning political stability, and I think this is also part of the political stability. And this observation comes from my 30 years experience as an investment banker advising governments and SOEs in Central Eastern Europe and CIS. So this good performance comes with inflows of foreign capital by means of FDIs, IPOs, PPPs in the country. And these entries of foreign investments rely on a number of factors, such of course as growth, profitability, but also on the governance, confidence the investors have in the country and in the company they invest in. So the remarks I will be making now on corporate governance to respond to the question I'm asked by Gian Piero are based both on my experience as financial advisor, but also from sitting on boards in Europe, North America, or emerging markets. You were asking, so what gives confidence that governance in a strategically important company is genuinely credible? If I can make one observation, investors rarely invest in governance structures. They invest in governance behavior. So most strategically important companies today can show a board charter, they can show committee structures, policies, and compliance frameworks. Those are necessary, but they are not what creates confidence. What investors really want to understand is how decisions are made when circumstances become difficult. When we evaluate companies in sectors such as energy, infrastructure, telecommunication, transportation, or financial services, we tend to look at 3 things. First, the decision quality. Is management willing to confront bad news early? Are risks escalated quickly? Do boards challenge management constructively? In strong organizations, problems surface early. In weak ones, they are hidden until they become crises. Second, the clarity of accountability. We ask very simple questions. When something goes wrong, who owns the decision? Companies with blurred accountability often appear efficient during good moments, but become fragile under stress. Third, alignment between public purpose and commercial discipline. This is very important for state influence, a strategically important enterprise. Investors are comfortable with public policy objectives. What creates uncertainty is when objectives are unclear, changing, and not transparently communicated. And ultimately, predictability is very important. Investors do not expect perfection. They expect transparency, consistency, and evidence that governance supports sound judgment. So the companies to attract long-term capital are not those that never face challenges, are the ones who are able to face the challenges and solve the problem through their governance.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Very, very good food for thought. Dimitri, I'm gonna address to you the next question. Let me just put an angle in this. Ariel mentioned, among the various things she mentioned behavior. Now, it is my impression that in many state-owned enterprises, people still work under what we can call a permission culture. If something is not expressly regulated, then they hesitate. I would not say it's prohibited, but is a break. This, of course, can reduce risk in the short term, but it can also turn governance into a compliance exercise. Now, what does it take for a strategic sector or a company to excel? Stop behaving like a compliance system and start behaving like a governed business. What is the turning point?
A tricky question, thank you. And I dedicated my whole professional life trying to answer it. And so what I think that the turning point is when people in the company start to take on the responsibilities and make the company much more efficient than it was before. And I think Uzbekistan companies and Uzbekistan governments at the moment faces this. So in many companies, governance means policies, approving, reporting, and those things are really very important. However, they do not automatically make business better. They're doing it just sometimes. So the real change happens when the main question is no longer, did we follow the rules? But will this help the company make the right decision and move forward? So for that to happen, we have to have a right strategy that provides the right direction. We have to have a structure that needs to make the responsibilities clear, processes that need to support the execution also, and people who need to understand that they are responsible, not just to following procedures, but to delivering results. For me, government becomes a growth tool when people stop asking, am I allowed to do this? And start asking, is this the right thing for the company? And am I ready to take the responsibility for this? So this is the key point, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitri. Yves, if I can turn to you. I guess this, Dimitri, and also following up on what you said, I guess this is also require ownership. It also require courage, isn't it? Because the rules do not always give you a perfect script, a perfect path. So in organizations that have grown up with a permission-based culture, really, how do you shift from this, permissive culture to a culture that enables change, that then create value?
Yes, thank you. Excellent question. You see, fear is expensive. It silences ideas, it slows down decisions, and it also makes talented people to hide behind the processes rather than stepping up and offering solutions. And I believe that the biggest challenge for modern organization is that the permission-led cultures, they are built on fear, and where accountable cultures, they're built on trust. And when people ask, am I allowed to do this? They often trying to avoid blame. But successful organizations need people to ask a completely different question. Well, what is the right decision in this particular moment for this particular organization? And I have the courage to stand behind that decision. And leadership has the critical role to play in this shift. When leaders create psychological safety, provide clarity of purpose, and reward ownership rather than just compliance. And the greatest ideas, we all know, they don't come from people who are afraid. I often say that culture is what people do when there is no rule telling them what to do. And the best organizations are not the ones with the thickest manuals, but they are the ones where people have the confidence to exercise judgment and integrity to take responsibility, and also have the courage to do the right thing. Because every organization eventually faces a moment when there is no policy, there is no checklist, and there is no manager in the room. And in that moment, trust is the foundation that allows ordinary employee to truly shine and provide real value for the organization. And at the end of the day, good governance is not about giving more permission, but it is about giving more trust and allowing people and organizations to truly flourish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will close this theme, and correct me if you think that I misinterpreted the discussion, with a conclusion. We started with the structure, we started with the law, but we discussed that the rules are not by themselves enough. We need people, we need behavior, and we need trust. This is really the key on what is looking as in order to make corporate governance better for the future. And this takes us to theme 2. How do organizations respond to repeated disruption, and whether they can turn this disruption into opportunities? Much of the risk modeling, risk management traditional model has been built in what they called the 3 lines of defense. But this was built really for a more predictable world. Essentially, companies were asked to identify the risk, mitigate it, and report it. But today, the world is really, really different. Geopolitical shocks, disruption, supply chain fragility, fast technological change are no longer occasional changes. These are part of the operating environment. So governance cannot only be defensive. Of course, it might protect the downside, but it must also help organizations to see where disruption creates opportunities. Let me take an example, and I'm not taking it from a developed country. I'm taking it from a tiny country in Southeastern Europe, which is facing the same challenges as Uzbekistan. It's Albania. We have been working with the state-owned hydropower utility. Being hydropower, it was exposed to hydrological volatility along with financial stress. In simple words, no rain, no power generation. At the EBRD, we supported the company, but not only with financial support. we work with governance, and we work with strategy. The company then adopted their first ever strategy and moved into floating solar panel on the reservoir. In other words, the company used the same asset base, but differently. And this is the governance point. The innovation was not only putting solar panel on the water. The innovation was the alignment between risk, governance, strategy, and investment. So the practical question is, who, if any, owns this conversion from disruption into strategy, from a challenge into an opportunity? Is it the board? Is it management? Is it risk? And if no one, is it a governance gap? Tarek, I'm looking at you. You work closely with companies on transformation and organizational design. In your experience, who owns the shift from risk management to strategy inside the organization? What governance structure actually help companies move from reacting to disruption to acting upon it?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is a very exciting topic, and frankly, I've been very inspired and excited about the interventions. Very rich, important topic. From the national level to the investor level to the corporate structure level, thank you for this. I want to just anchor two ideas, perhaps for future thought and also debate in the interaction with the audience. The first is governance as a source of alpha. Okay? We talk about many different sources of alpha for investors. Governance actually is a source of alpha. Ariel highlighted certain conditions from an investor point of view that relate to that also. The second is if you stopped and thought a little bit about risk as the flip side of strategy. Risk is the mirror side of the strategy. Strategy is actually about allocating resources to your optimal level of risk and scenario decisions. So those two ideas, by design, then lead you to what you're talking about, which is how do you align, therefore, both functionally but also in the structure of the organization, the governance and the risk assessment with the strategy and what is needed to move forward on value creation for the shareholders and on sustainability of the economic value proposition of the organization. Now, if you take fact base, when you add up all the risks you were talking about, from geopolitical shocks to macroeconomic crisis, to technology innovation speed, to climate change and climate change impact on operations, all of this then becomes a need for an ongoing exercise because risk does not wait for the quarterly board meeting. So when you go from this and then you observe some of our work with boards and with management teams on how do you bridge these two things, you land on a very, in my mind, is a simple structure. One idea is mindset and people, and Eve talked about culture, but I'll come to it a little bit just to support some of the points she was sharing. The other one is process, which is what you were highlighting. So on mindset and people, the idea of ongoing granular stewardship as a mindset of a board and of management team, granular stewardship of strategy and risk becomes really critical in order to be able to add value. And the idea to mix the people composition with people that are able to understand the risk, but also bridge the strategy. So when you think about the composition, both within management of role of the risk function and role on the board of the risk committee and the mandate you give it, the adjustment there. The second is you go to process. So when you think about process, the first thing that we were talking about on this panel is actually how do you understand this risk? And we like to think at the firm that there are three types of lenses one would take this. They're cute names, so I like them, I'll repeat them. One is, what are your black swans as an organization? What are your gray rhinos? So what are the foreseeable risks? And the third one is, what is the silver lining? And the silver lining is exactly that bridge you were talking about, which is how do you convert and understand the black swans, the gray rhinos, into actually what are your opportunities? and then embedding this in the committee's process of questioning management and prompting the right conversation around, yes, these are great risks, but now how do you convert them? The last one, and this is, I think, the most difficult one, is the agility in the decision making. So again, Ariel was talking about the quality of the decision, the agility in the quality of that decisions, and the ability to repurpose resources quickly in order to take the opportunity that is open to you is really important in the process. That obviously requires a very strong partnership between management and the board in the culture that Eve was highlighting of the organization. So in a way, in the face of any crisis, of any risk, you can freeze because you're now controlling risk. Or you can target and charge because you have the systems to actually do that.
Amazing. So essentially it's both process and people. One is not enough.
No.
You need to have two. And you also need to have a mindset. Backward, because when we look at risk, mostly we look backward. Winston Churchill used to say, more backward we look, more forward we see. But then, you know, you need to translate this backward looking into a forward thinking. Ferdinand, let me turn to you now. Because climate and transition are very clear example of this, dual challenge. They are risk, but also investment opportunities. Are board today treating the transition as a strategic opportunity or still mainly as a compliance exercise? What does a good board oversight look like when climate is both a risk and an opportunity? And of course, would you agree that climate change is indeed both a risk, huge risk, but also a huge opportunity?
I think I can only agree to that last statement you're making. And indeed, climate, we're here in Uzbekistan, maybe let me start off with this. I think we're all aware that it's everywhere, but maybe also, especially in Uzbekistan, with the water scarcity, the rising temperature, the pressure on the landscape, on the agriculture. This is something which is there, is not going to go away. It's going to get probably worse. So you need to take care of this in your board, in your management team. I think climate governance, it should be part of the nice word is the fiduciary duty of the board of directors. So it should not be just a compliance exercise that we're just mentioning. I think that is the challenge, and some companies also here in Uzbekistan are already moving in the right direction. We should be moving from governance, let's say 1.0 to governance 2.0, in which you basically shift from the compliance, not backward looking, but basically looking at his history instead of more forward-looking strategic orientation, in which you can turn those risks, I think Tarek was mentioning them also, turn risks and threats into opportunities, and that requires some hard thinking. And that is something which should be part of strategy of a company. It should not be on page 73 of your strategy document, one paragraph about climate and climate risk. No, it should be there from the start. It should be integrated as much as possible. So I think that's very important. So let me try to highlight maybe the difference between governance 1.0, governance 2.0. It's really about, and I'm just making maybe a few, let's say, very simple statements. But if you're looking at compliance 1.0, it's really trying to avoid, penalties, making sure that you tick all the boxes, be in compliance with all the rules and regulations. It's a bit of a defensive approach. Whereas if you take the 2.0 governance approach, it's more thinking forward about strategy. How can we turn risks maybe into opportunities? It's a completely different mindset. It's also, let's say, how you organize yourself. Would you have a sustainability officer somewhere in your organization reporting to the board every quarter in a shiny report, and the person is presenting the report and everybody nods and say, yes, fantastic, well done? Is that what climate governance is? No, I think it should be different. It should probably even be part of every board committee in a supervisory board. It should be an integral part of the audit committee. It should be an integral part of the risk committee's agenda. It should not be a separate committee. So my let's say, free recommendation, if your company still has a sustainability officer, good, keep him. But if you have a separate sustainability committee, good if you can move towards a situation where you don't need to have such a separate sustainability or climate committee anymore. So that perspective, I think, is also changing. And I guess, indeed, not look at just the next quarter or the next year, but have a long-term view. I think that's also the difference between governance 1.0 to let's say, governance 2.0, where you have a more strategic view, a more long-term view, where you indeed, based on a good business model in which you factor in also the climate risks, you basically do the stress testing, for example, I think a very important element, to see in which situations you enter into the red zone, what mitigating actions you can take. So also the scenario analysis, the stress testing should include those climate risks and those climate aspects. That's also something which is, let's say, in Uzbekistan, we see this moving in the right direction. Let me very briefly, if you allow, Jean-Pierre, tell you that Chapter 0, which is the think tank I'm associated with here in Uzbekistan, they do an annual, let's say, temperature check on how Uzbekistan corporations, state-owned enterprises, are moving in corporate governance, but especially also on their climate governance aspects. And the good news is the movement is in the right direction. The movement is in the right direction. Of course, still a long way to go, but there are definitely positive trends visible. So disclosures are improving, but definitely also the way organizations in Uzbekistan organize themselves, also at board level, definitely improving. And maybe for you, interesting to know, if you check the website of Chapter 0, you will see the ratings, which we assign every year. It's a free resource, by the way. The results of 2025, I mean, we will publish them soon, will be available hopefully pretty soon. But you will see that some of the Uzbek companies are really doing a good job. And I can already reveal that last year's winner was, I think, Navoy Azot, and I think Al Malik was also there, maybe some familiar names for some of you. They're high on the list, and they'll probably continue to be high on the list. So there is some good examples already, but it's a long way to go. Maybe before concluding my little talk, let me say that one important thing is that in boards, what is really the challenge, I guess, in many companies, is that you need to define, or you need to create a language which has, for example, climate and climate resilience and climate governance. Everybody is talking about the topic, so you need to definitely invest in training for board members, for management team members across the organization, to make sure that it's not just a topic written by the sustainability officer on page 73 of the report, but no, it's part of your everyday language in management, in the board. So this type of, let's say, fluency in climate jargon, climate terminology, as part of your strategy, that is definitely something which you, as a company, should be investing in. And luckily, we see this also happening in Uzbekistan. Let me keep it at this, Jean-Pierre. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ferdinand. Of course, we have started 10 minutes late, so I hope that the organizer will allow us to go 10 minutes ahead of the schedule. But again, if we can keep our comments shorter, then it will help in order to keep the time. Quick question to Eva, and then I would like also to turn to Dimitri for a flash observation. Eve, we talked about behavior, we talk about mindset. How do you reward the mindset of, looking forward, of finding opportunities without weakening discipline? And of course, I mean, also touch about what Ferdinand said, which I fully agree. It's a language. Board and management need to speak the same language. Sometimes it seems that they don't. board asks something and management reply a completely different thing. So, we need to be on the same page.
Yes, thank you. So one of the greatest gifts that I ever received in my early career was that someone believed in me. And someone trusted me with a challenge bigger than my experience long before I was able to believe in myself. And I was terrified of failing, but these opportunities completely changed my life. And for me, that is what leadership is about. It's about creating those moments for others. And it is not about creating people who are afraid to fail, but it's about creating people who have the confidence to grow. And in a world of constant disruption, organizations can fear change, or they can learn and grow through it. And the difference is in culture. When people are afraid of making mistakes, they stop thinking creatively. But when leaders create trust and support, people stop asking a question, how do I avoid failure? And they start asking a question of, how can I solve this? How can I help to solve this? And that does not mean lowering the standards. We should never reward recklessness. But we should also reward courage, we should reward responsibility and willingness to step forward. And I learned that people rarely remember the project that completely transformed their career, but they always remember the person who believed in them. And I believe the most resilient organizations are the ones that allowing ordinary people to discover that they're capable of extraordinary things.
Thank you very much. I will remember this, definitely. Dimitri, let me conclude with you. I started the discussion, the introduction to the team, taking the Albanian example. Can you give us one example in your work where governance help a company adapt under pressure, and one where governance instead make it slower and less competitive?
First of all, let me add something to my colleague's words. And I think the secret of success is the possibility to adapt to constant changes that we do face all the times. And as early as the board will understand this, the company will be more efficient. And the secret, I think, is the flexibility. So the flexible organizational design and the constant adoption of the strategy and the very nice organizational behavior. That's what Eva said regarding this. And if we are talking about some examples, let us refer to COVID-19, if you do remember the case. If we definitely yes. And we do have lots of companies that could change themselves very quickly, make several decisions very quickly, and adapt to the situations. For example, retailers. When you do have 2 or 3 weeks to go, in any case, you have an option to, for example, to go online and to start selling online. Otherwise, you have no time in any case. So, or you make some try to find solution among your board, waste your time, and then die, unfortunately. So that's what's happening usually. And if you are not adapting yourself to the changes, in any case, so this will unfortunately come to an end. So that's what yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just add up one thing. I think we should differentiate this case when the corporate governance run by business to business, B2B model or B2G model. When it comes to the B2G model, professionals are dealing with non-professionals. So government side is in most of the cases are non-professionals. Then the only solution is to educate, to share the experience, and to initiate the dialogue. And that's the only solution that we may face. And that brings to the case when the expectations are somehow leveraged, and the talks are more positive and equal and others. When non-professional is afraid of something or he doesn't understand what is the real meaning or what kind of benefit it brings to the country, he will definitely say no. That's his type of behavior because he's afraid of taking wrong decision. And the only solution is to initiate the dialogue and to teach him and to share the experience and educate him. Thank you.
Indeed. Indeed. I don't know if this is a very interesting point, and I agree. And but you have your recipe, you mentioned. You have your 5 ingredients that can make it work. And let me just build on something that was discussed, especially on, adaptation and creating the moment, because we are living in a very, very particular moment. And of course, we cannot speak about the future of corporate governance without touching upon artificial intelligence. But I will frame it carefully. Because AI, it changes completely the game. It changes how information is prepared, how questions are posed, how answers are being formulated. So AI is not just a technological issue. It's really a decision-making issue. For those that have my age, can see it also like a democratization process. Let me explain. When I was a kid, when I was in my early education life, in order to do research, I had to go to the library. I had to use books, big bricks, and I had to ask advice to people. Then internet came, and there was no need to go to the library anymore because the technology came to me. And along with internet came the computer with all the digital shit, so I didn't really need the calculators. But then, for those of you that know that have ever used Excel, they know how difficult it is to go with formulas, VLOOKUP, and the like. AI changes completely the game. Now everything is easy, everything is simple. But whatever question you ask, you give an answer. You given some information. AI gives you plausible answers. But plausible is not always reliable. So the question is not whether AI is useful. Of course it is. The real question is whether organizations are able to use it well and know when to trust it. That brings us to legislation, because Uzbekistan, like many other countries, has started to legislate on AI. But the first way of AI law is about setting boundaries, protecting personal data, labeling AI-generated content, preventing biases, and so forth. This is essential, but it's not the same as helping companies to use and to integrate AI in their workflows. And the regulation will not redesign board paper. It will not improve management reporting. The law can set the boundaries, but governance must create the operating model. This is the governance challenge. Let me do an example. Imagine you receive a 200-page audit report together with a board pack just the night before a board meeting. And the instinct might be, I will run it through AI, but can I do it safely? Or tomorrow all the information about my company will be out in the internet to anyone. So the question for the board is, do we have a governance model that allows us to use AI safely, intelligently, and accountably, while actually improving decision? Tarek, maybe I start with you. How should companies build a AI-enabled governance and architecture? How should they integrate AI into the decision-making so that it improves choices without blurring accountability?
Okay, very, very obviously deep question. We can have a very long session on this. And I want to first apologize to you all because I don't have a full answer. We are learning. We know some stuff, but we also don't know a lot. And I'd be obviously very curious, anyone who has suggestions on this topic. So my starting point is an apology. Having said that, there is some fact in this, in that in our most recent board survey, we found that AI-savvy boards, on average, outperform their peer companies in almost every industry that you look at. So, knowledge of AI. Now, the reality is we also found that less than 25% of companies don't have a board-approved AI governance policy. So just consider this. How many in this room used AI in the last 2 days? Okay, so the majority of us did. So imagine that less than 25% of the companies we work for wouldn't have that. It's a real challenge of our times. I think Mr. Abdullah also raised an incredibly important point, and then you added to it, which is what is the role of sovereign AI when you think about what is your strategy as a country and what framework you put around governance in organizations is a very critical foundation to what you can do and how you want to do your strategy. But remember, strategy, governance, strategy, risk is the flip side. So I'll just share a very brief early learning, if you want, and then we can build on it together. The first one is clarity of the strategy when it comes to my stance as an organization relative to AI. Am I an innovator moving forward? Am I a follower? It's okay to be a follower if you know that you want to be a follower, particularly in vast change like the one that is happening. That then obviously is an important top-down view on what governance you want to put in place and how far you want to go. The second, somebody mentioned, actually Ferdinand highlighted the importance of board members to be savvy in understanding sustainability and climate. This is even, I would say, more or as important of the savviness of having the language of AI in order to know what conversation to have, both around risk and around strategy. I'm going to link the first point I was trying to make, because if you're not actually planning for an AI-enabled strategy, you might not have a future. And the last point, back to the point that Ariel made, in all of the risks related to AI and governance, blurred accountability is the silent killer. And I'm using this word. Blurred accountability is the silent, and with AI, it's very difficult to actually put in place a single point accountability. There's questions what's outside, what's inside the organization, and within the organization, there's questions of who used what for what decision. So against this, obviously, it is important to then have a very clear, at least now, early point of centralized accountability when it comes to ownership of decision while enabling distributed execution. Last point I'll make, this year we celebrated 100 years at McKinsey. And in all these years advising boards, one of the most important learnings for me is that technology comes and goes, like you say. And against it, we'll have checklists and we'll have structures. But what really is a source of sustainability for any long-term investor, like Ariel was saying, is the idea that a board has stewardship, granular stewardship, which is timeless, and an ability to culturally spar with management on a strategic dialogue. And AI is no different to that, but probably one of the most revolutionary periods in the known history for us in this corporate environment.
Thank you very much, Tarek. Eva, if I might come to you. Technology comes and goes, people stay. What has to change so that people use AI with confidence but not dependency? How do you build a culture that uses AI intelligently without surrendering judgment to it? Because the point he made about accountability is very important. At the end of the story, somebody needs to be accountable for the decision, and the engine is not. So,
yes. No, thank you for that. So I think the biggest fear people have around AI is not that machines will become more intelligent, but it is about that human beings will stop thinking for themselves. And for me, AI should support our vision, our creativity, our ideas, but it should never replace it. We should use it as a tool rather than a compass. And we're allowed to provide, if we're allowed to provide all the answers and dictate all our decisions, then we risk losing something incredibly valuable. It is our authenticity and our judgment. That is why the goal is not to teach people to trust AI, but it is to teach people to trust themselves while they're using AI intelligently. And we all know AI can make us faster, more productive, and more informed, but it should never replace critical thinking, ethics, and human responsibility. Leaders need to build a culture where people ask not only what does AI recommend, but also does this make sense? And is it aligned with our values? And am I prepared to stand behind this decision? And the organizations that will thrive will not be the ones that adopt AI the fastest, but the ones that will combine the speed of technology with the wisdom, the accountability, and the humanity of the people. Because at the end of the day, if a decision changes someone's life and affects someone's business or someone's future, it should have human heart and human consciousness behind this.
I love the human, how you put it, with the human dimension, because this is actually the point. Technology will never substitute people. I think that AI, I agree with you, AI does not remove the board judgment. It just raised the standard for it. It makes people think, really, is it meaningful? Ariel, let me come back to you, because at the beginning, you mentioned a number of points that investors look at in order, to trust. How about AI? Will AI governance become part of how investors assess governance quality? What would give investors comfort that AI is improving judgment rather than just creating, new risk?
Yes, historically, investors evaluated governance through questions such as board independence, risk control, audit quality, and disclosure. And AI governance is becoming the next chapter of that conversation, as we just discussed. And like Eva, you just mentioned also that AI is a productivity tool, but it's also moving to be part of a decision-making architecture of organizations. So what happens for investors? I think they are thinking around three questions. First, where is AI being used in a corporate, in an organization? Is it supporting internal efficiency, customer interaction, lending decisions, procurement, healthcare diagnosis, infrastructure management? The materiality of AI risk depends on the nature of the decision which is involved. Second, what oversight exists? We do not expect directors in the boardroom to be data scientists, but we do expect boards to understand where AI influences important decisions and how those risks are monitored. And third, and perhaps most importantly, who remains accountable, like Tarek was mentioning? The market will never accept the answer that the algorithm decided. So if an AI-supported decision causes financial losses or regulatory breaches or reputational damage, investors will still expect accountability from management and from the board. In that sense, AI governance is not really a technology issue, but it's a governance issue. So the companies that will inspire confidence are not necessarily those who are deploying most AI, but the ones who are demonstrating that the technology strengthens judgment rather than replacing it.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Abdullah, let me conclude this theme with you. From a policy and institutional perspective, and also considering, the concern that you mentioned before about, the difficult relationship between, B and G. Will AI help to bridge this gap? How do you see? You work in strategic sector in the strategic decision making of the government. How do you see AI on the way forward? How are you harnessing this technology?
Both positive and negative. The positive because there was several cases before that each government was dealing with specific question with the business, and AI may address those cases and bring back what kind of solutions were taken and what was wrong, what was good. And from that perspective, I consider that AI may be used as a very good tool. But when it comes to the very specific questions, which have a very unique nature, then AI is not helpful. Then you have to talk, you have to initiate the dialogue. As I said, you have to educate both sides, you have to share the concerns, you have to be more open. I mean, and then it comes to both 5 directions which I have mentioned in the beginning. So those are what are the real concerns of the government and what are the real concerns of the management. You have to be very open, very pragmatic, and you have to come up with this. And I said, the real gap in here, those are two types. First is expectations. The second is execution of the taken decisions. There are the gaps, which are really may bring or may corrupt the trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the conclusion of this team, and I would like to add, before moving to the next one, which is the future of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, I would like maybe to add another element that was somehow discussed, but maybe did not emerge completely, on the necessity of embedding AI into the workflows. This has been somehow mentioned, but this is where, because people, we talked about people work according to their dynamics. They have the workshop. They need some help with the work they're doing. We don't want that they use the dynamics as sandboxes, putting information just in the way, as Tarek was saying, without any governance policy. This is important. This will help harnessing really the power of AI within the organizational structure. If AI will change how decisions are made, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, changes the criteria against which those decisions are judged over time. Because ESG is about sustainability, is about long term. Climate risk and sustainability have not disappeared. The pressure is still there. What has changed is the language around them. In some markets, has become more political, more contested, and what has produced have some familiar behaviors. You might have heard of greenwashing, saying more than is real, green wishing, promising more that can be delivered, green hushing, saying less because companies want to avoid criticism and litigation. So the question is not whether ESG has disappeared. It has not. The question is what form is taking now. Are we seeing ESG fatigue, or we are going to a more mature phase? And again, Uzbekistan gives a very good example here, because as Ferdinand mentioned, Chapter 0 Uzbekistan shows that ESG is increasingly being discussed at the board, not only as a reporting issue. At the same time, of course, implementation remains a bit uneven. I believe, like AI, ESG will only be credible if it will be connected to the business itself. Strategy, risk, disclosure, accountability, and capital allocation. Because in the long term, sustainability is not outside the business. It's about whether the business remains resilient, can survive, whether it remains investable and trusted. To me, the future of ESG is that less slogan and more business substance, and therefore more governance discipline. Ferdinand, I will start with you. If climate and sustainability have moved into the boardroom, what does it actually require from the director? What should the board stop doing, and what they should start doing differently?
Thank you. And Indeed, I like your remarks on greenwashing, green hushing. That's also a very good one. No, actually, I think on Uzbekistan, as I mentioned before, the trend is definitely positive in terms of how ESG, or let's say climate risk, is being treated, climate governance is being treated. So there is definitely a movement in the right direction, and indeed supported by also government initiatives, definitely changes in, let's say, priorities in government, for example, to move into renewable energy, to indeed move closer to international standards, for example, in the financial sector, on the regulatory aspects for climate risk. So there is definitely the impetus is there to start moving in the right direction, but even better if companies do it themselves, and I think we already covered many aspects of that. I think just to give you a few very practical things which we could be doing at board level and maybe stop doing. Some of the things I probably already said. But remember what I told you about the sustainability officer. It's great if you have a person like that. Let him definitely, or her, let this person definitely do the reporting, but definitely also listen as a board to your CEO and your other management board members, what they have to say. It should not be a silo. It should not be just a sustainability officer and everybody else goes on doing their business as usual. No, it should be important. So try to move in that direction. I think another thing is, let's not create separate committees for sustainability or climate. Let's integrate it into the other standing board committees, audit, risk, strategy. It should be part and parcel of everybody's business ultimately. I think what is definitely important, I think it was already mentioned before, use or let's say integrate climate risk into your strategy efforts from day one. Not on page 73, 2 paragraphs. It should be part and parcel of the whole exercise, including in your modeling, in your Excel. I think somebody was already mentioning Excel. Use your stress scenarios, your stress testing wisely. Include the climate risk factors. Discuss the mitigants and discuss the red lines, etc. And indeed, it will also lead boards to discuss, instead of just looking at the compliance side of things, it also leads hopefully to more discussions on future decisions, or let's say on decisions on the future, turning risks into opportunities. So it can be done. You can change your, let's say, risk into opportunities from a climate perspective. So there is definitely things to be done to change the way of how to approach climate risk. Actually, and I think that's the one I mentioned before, I'll close off with that. Indeed, make sure that you speak the language. There is still, I think, some miles to make in terms of, let's say, creating this common language inside your organizations to speak about the subject, for example, of climate risk and climate governance in an integrated way. So also at the board of directors level. So would be good if you have at least one or maybe even more people who already know this, and definitely also the other members of the board and the management team should be trained, if not already done, or should go to workshops, or should make sure that they are proficient in the language and start speaking the same language. On that note, maybe a good piece of guidance, again, I'm just going to say this verbally. There's an excellent white paper being published in January of this year. I just read out the name, I hope you will remember. It's Board Leadership for Growth and Resilience, which is covering exactly these themes. I hope there's a way in our, let's say, infrastructure here at the forum where I can also, let's say, put this for you to refer to. But this white paper is an excellent way of, let's say, giving you food for thought on how to move from where you probably are today to where you want to be in the future. So there's definitely these just maybe very practical steps, Jean-Pierre, to keep in the back of your mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And let me say that I do agree. I do agree, especially on the point that we really don't need more committee. is not about the number of committees, it's about the quality of the committees. It's not about, it's how many body we have. It's about really the quality of them. It's about them. Ariel, from an investor perspective, has ESG become less important or simply more selective and more grounded in economics, in the business? What do you look for today? What is really substance and what is noise?
I think we can say that it has matured, this theme, and the focus has clearly changed from adopting frameworks to execution. And so when you ask what do investors look for today, I would say first, credible transition plans. No slogan, but realistic plans supported by capital expenditure, technology choices, and measurable milestones. Second is resilience, because climate risk is increasing, as we know, and now it's looked more from the operational point of view. Supply chains, energy security, water availability, physical infrastructure. And third is governance, which remains the foundation, because without governance, environmental and social commitments are difficult to implement consistently into a company.
Thank you very much. Dimitri, let me turn to you. We've seen that the ESG is changing and has been changing. Quick question. What has changed? How do you see the change in practice over the last 3 to 5 years?
I think that to take corporate sector, the word ESG is no longer about ESG itself, to be honest. Most companies don't even use the word ESG in their practice. And they usually talk about much more practical issues, like reducing costs, or attracting investments, or keeping customers, employees, and all this stuff. That's why ESG is gradually becoming part of normal management rather than separate agenda. I think that you can achieve, in the early stages, companies are focused on survival, and later they may launch environmental or social projects. But these often exist on their own and have their little impact on real business decisions. The real shift happens when sustainability becomes part of the strategy, and when decisions about resources, people, and transparency and long-term risks are built into the way the company operates every day. So you can achieve that just by publishing a report or writing any kind of policy. And you need to have clear goals, clear accountability, and leaders who are willing to build that in the next quarter. So in my view, the future of ESG is not about make standards or more reports. It's about becoming a natural part of good management in the company. And when a company thinks not only about the next quarter or profit, but also about where it wants to be in the next 5 or 10 years, then it will work.
So integration within the business, breaking the silos, and concentration on people. Yves, do you want to add something on that? How about the leadership? What is the component in the, and I agree, let's call it sustainability more than just ESG.
Yes, thank you. So I think we need to stop seeing ESG as the business exercise, start seeing it as a human one. Because the rivers, the forests, the coastlines, agricultural land that we protect today will shape prosperity, resilience, and well-being for the generations to come. And the decisions in the boardrooms that we make today will become the world that our children will inherit. And that is why culture is the most important factor. Because leadership priorities matter, people watch what leaders do, not what they say. And incentives matter because it influences behavior. But cultures determine what people do, what choices they make when nobody's watching. And if company only rewards short-term thinking and short-term financial results, ESG will always remain just a reporting exercise. But when leaders create a culture of long-term thinking, accountability, and stewardship, then ESG truly becomes a part of organization's DNA. And organizations that will succeed are not the ones with the best sustainability reports, because in the end, ESG is not about the reports that we leave behind. It is about the world which we will hand over to the next generation. And it is our responsibility that if we not leave it better, then at least the same that we found.
Ferdinand, yes, you wanted to add something.
I think I fully agree with you, Eva, and I think it's almost a moral call on all of us. I think fully agree. What really helps in a corporate context, I mean, it may sound very plain and simple. I forgot to mention it just before. One of the things which we should be doing as boards and also as management is to agree also on sounds simple, on KPIs in this sphere, and just make sure that, let's say, it's not only a moral obligation, but there's also, let's say, a certain degree of incentive for management and probably also for the board to, it comes back to indeed accountability, transparency, just include it in your KPIs. One of the elements in the KPIs could be climate or sustainability related, and you can track it and you can basically help hold people accountable.
I agree. What a discussion we had. Time has come and we need to close, but before we close, let me leave you with a final thought. Based on what we discussed, good governance is not a decoration, it's infrastructure. And like all good infrastructure, we often notice it when it's missing. Today's discussion has shown the future of governance will not be defined solely by formal rules. We need people. It will be defined by the quality of boards, by the credibility of independent judgment, by the ability to make better decisions under difficult times, and by the institutional capacity to turn governance into trust. This is what connects governance to investment. And this is what connects governance to resilience. And this is what connects governance to long-term value. Please join me in a round of applause for our panel. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much.